Guys, I'm Kansas and I'm with Voices, as you can see in the background here. I am a team lead of our client sales team, so I have a book of accounts that we do projects with, as well as I manage a team that each have their own book of accounts. So I see quite a lot of auditions, and we do a lot of project scoping and work together on that. So hopefully I'll be able to answer any of your guys' questions and give you guys some good tips on kind of how to best stand out when you're auditioning on Voices, how to use the site, how clients use the site, and just kind of any tips and tricks that I've picked up along the way on how we sort our auditions and what we send to our clients when they come through us for auditions. So if you guys want to get some questions going in the chat, I'm happy to kind of jump in and answer them. If not, I can go through some of the ones that came in from social over the past couple weeks. So one of the big things that came in from social, one of the trends was like, what's the biggest mistake you see talent making in their auditions? So kind of like what makes them stand out, whether it be good or bad. More so around like what makes things bad. I would say the biggest kind of mistakes we see would be poor audio quality. So a lot of talent will like try to get an audition in on the fly, like whether it be from their phone, their booth's not set up, their mic's not properly set up, they're in a hurry, they didn't have time to read the full job posting to take the creative direction, and it ends up eliminating them, and then they've unfortunately just wasted their time over small technical errors just because they were trying to get it in a rush. If you can't get it done properly and the way you'd want it to, then I would actually just skip the audition because you're probably very unlikely to see it actually come through. Same with just uploading a demo. If there's a sample script, make sure you read it, I would say 99.99% of clients, if they gave you a sample script and you don't read it, they won't send your audio on to their clients because it doesn't match the others that have read the sample script. And the other last thing is slating. A lot of clients will rule you out if you slate your audio just because it causes kind of like a weird disruption in comparison to the others that don't. So they're able to make their auditions flow and compare apples to apples better when the audio isn't slated. Hi Joy, nice to see you're joining us from Michigan. Anyone else, kind of everyone located in the States? I know we're here in Canada. Anyone overseas, England, anything fun? Awesome. So another one that came in via socials was kind of, is it risky to make a script your own, or should you stick to exactly what's being asked? This one's kind of twofold. I think you want to make it your own, but while taking into consideration their creative direction. So if I'm kind of doing something for a video here or a voiceover that we're using internally, what I'm going to do is interpret their creative direction and apply it to the script. So I might change like where I'm going to pause, where I'm going to put emphasis, but I'll do a couple different takes because sometimes the way I'm going to interpret it is going to be different than the way, say, Gio or Randy interpret it and what they're looking for. So I want to be able to show that I can take variety and I can take creative direction in my demo. So that's why I'd say most talent usually offer 2 to 3 takes when they're doing an audition. Another question that came in is, if a client is looking for someone with a different accent than I have, should I avoid auditioning? And I would say yes. A big thing, kind of similar to that, doing audition in a rush is if you're not a fit for the creative direction, whether it be accent or just the tone and pacing that they typically go for, like if you just struggle with like a deep voice and that's what they're looking for, your chance of winning that job is so much lower that I would actually just pass and move on to the next one because you don't want to risk wasting your time. If you maybe, let's say, tone creative, you want to try it to kind of use it as practice, that's one thing. But when you get into auditioning for different accents, it's kind of a thing where everyone wants an authentic accent. And then you actually almost discredit yourself if you start auditioning as someone that is from the UK when you're not, because they likely will go through your profile, go through your demo, see where you live, because people do a lot of background history, especially when looking for an authentic voice. For example, we didn't specify that we were looking for an authentic someone from Ireland. Earlier this year on a casting I did, and we were very lucky where one of the clients on the project was from Ireland, so she caught it, because it's actually seen as almost an insult to kind of be mimicking an accent, especially if it's being displayed in the local market. So you'll see some people like can get away with like they know how to do a UK voice, but they're not authentic or local, but it's being used for like a phone system in the US. That's one thing, but when you get into kind of like it's going to be played in the UK, people can pick it out right away. So I would recommend, especially if it at all hints that it's going to be in a local market or they're looking at an authentic accent, just skip it. It ends up sometimes doing more work against you than for. Yeah, like we said in the chat, I work with quite a number of large clients, everything from e-learning to advertising to software companies to kind of big brands that have their own creative in-house studios. I would say my specialty comes a lot more within the big brands that do their own in-house projects. So where they're pumping out everything from e-learning to phone systems to kind of national TV, radio, internet campaigns. But I've worked with kind of everything under the sun because I've been here for over 5 years now. So I'm kind of like a voices dinosaur when it comes to this. Another question that we got was, is it best to niche down, or do you suggest auditioning to a variety of styles? I personally recommend auditioning to a variety. Knowing what you're really good at is helpful, so you can prioritize. Like, if you know you've knocked like conversational, girl next door out of the park, like picking those to make them your top priority is what I would recommend, but I would still play around, because we've seen kind of over time that there's a trend. So like it'll trend towards like girl next door, and then it moved a little bit more to conversational. And now I'm seeing a lot more like professional but engaging is kind of the direction. So it's all kind of seems a lot in that like natural way, but how they want you to come across as natural, which is ironic because it's not natural at all, is what changes year over year, unfortunately. So I wouldn't want to niche down too much, but if you know like you're great at character voices or you're great at reading audiobooks, again, I would prioritize those up front. Know what you're really good at, do those first, and then if you have spare time in your day, add in those additions. And you can always see auditioning as a way of practicing. That's something I would tell any new talent, is one of the best things about voices is you get to practice and get real feedback, because you get to know whether or not you were shortlisted on real scripts with real direction. So instead of like searching Google for hours trying to find scripts with direction and make things up, it's just in front of you, and it's also a job opportunity. So if you are new and you feel like you're not getting it, just think about all the hours that you're putting into honing in your craft. And while you're doing all of that practice and getting better, you're also still putting your like resume, is in your audition, out there on a regular basis. And a lot of times things will come. It just takes some time, especially for newer people, to kind of be able to truly translate like what a client is asking for and what they're wanting from the voice talent, because the creatives are still human too, and we're human. So it's just sometimes you struggle a little bit to perfectly portray what you're looking for across. And even my favorite line from clients is like, I'll know it when I hear it. And I'm like, that's great. Can't cast for that. So like, you have to give them some options. We'll share some demos. We'll kind of help backtrack them to get them onto an actual creative direction, so that we know you guys can do your job and fulfill the creative direction. But sometimes it's just learning like how to pick out like from the scripts and the direction they give to what kind of piece of art they're looking for. And sometimes it's also just a bit of luck. Sometimes you guess right, sometimes you don't. And unfortunately, while dealing with humans, like things aren't always as they seem, or they change. That's another big one. Sometimes we'll cast for something, they'll love a talent, madly in love with talent, and then the client comes back and they're like, you know what? We liked Emily, but now we want a deep male voice. And it's total opposite. You have no idea where it came from when they were sitting around discussing things in a boardroom, but we pivot just like everyone else does. So don't beat yourself up too bad if you feel you're kind of never getting your card drawn. It's likely just a matter of time. Nice to see you too, Sharon. Tennessee. That's a fun one. Went to Tennessee 2 years ago. Chattanooga though, but it was a fun time. Lots of good kind of bars, restaurants down there, and lots of good live music. Joy says, is it true that if the client already has more than 20 auditions to go through, then it wouldn't be worth my time sending in my audition just because of the volume the client has had to listen to? I would actually say that's false. How our voice match score works actually is it sorts auditions by how likely your profile matches what they've inputted into the creative direction. And then let's say there's 10 people with 100% match, then that would sort by time. So there's still that incentive of like, if you're 100% match and you were the first 100% match to get it in, you'll be the very first audition. But there could be 40 auditions, but if they're all an 80% match and you come in at 100% match, you would be at the top. So I wouldn't let number of responses deter you. I think if it's over kind of like 80, that's when I would maybe say you can start passing, maybe prioritize ones with lower, because there's a higher chance that there's been some 100%, but definitely only 20 is quite low. I would say most clients shortlist internally 10 to 20 auditions, and then they'll go through them sitting on their own, whether it just be one creative director or a group. And then they'll narrow it down to 2 to 3 that they'll then pick from. But usually when they pull the auditions from the site on a short list, they usually aim for 10 plus. So I would recommend, especially if it's under 50, I would definitely audition. And even past that, you never know, right? Audio quality could be a thing. They could be people with the wrong accent, like we've talked about before. So it never hurts to throw your hat in the ring. If there's something without auditions that's also 100% match for you, you feel, then maybe start with that one. But it never hurts to put your audition in the ring, because when I sort auditions, I go through the whole list, even if there's 170 of them, which very rarely happens. But when it does, we still go through them. And sometimes it's the people in the middle, or someone that even maybe they didn't fully fill out their profile, so they were only a 50% match, but they're an amazing voiceover artist and they hit the creative direction on the head. I'm still going to send them through. I don't care where they are in the order. I care more about kind of how they fit the needs. Sharon is asking, how important is audio quality? Is it a great fit and bad quality versus not so good fit and great audio quality? I would say the ideal scenario is they're always going to want both, but I would say you're going to get ruled out quicker for poor audio quality than you will for your voice not being 100% what they're looking for. Because a lot of clients, if you're 80% there, if they're like, we really like you, you just sound a little older than we were thinking, they'll request a callback audition. They'll set up a live directed session. They know they can provide creative direction. Clients are usually quite aware that the range of a voiceover artist is this big, and so that they can play around if it's close. But if you put an audition that's close, but the audio quality isn't good, a lot of times they'll just rule you out. Purely because they're worried you're not going to be able to deliver a broadcast quality piece. And it seems kind of weird, but it does make sense in terms of like your longevity of your career typically as a voiceover artist. If you have great quality, they're going to assume you have great range. If you have poor quality, they're going to assume you have poor range and that you're newer to voiceover. Just because of how expensive, mics can be, studio setups. And we have some great hacks of making your studio sound amazing when you start up without kind of investing a huge amount up front. So I would recommend taking a peek at our blogs if that's something you're struggling a little bit with getting the audio quality. But I would say it's the number one thing that stops people from getting hired, is that the client's just worried they're not going to be able to edit it and put it in the video from what you're going to give them. Thanks for coming, Melissa. It's nice to see you. I recognize quite a few of these names from shortlisting auditions, so it's good to see everyone here. One of the other questions that everyone kind of always wants to know is, what's the most memorable project I've worked on? Mine's kind of a funny one. It's not like, it wasn't a big project. It wasn't anything crazy, and it was a little bit outside of what we typically do, which is, I think, is why it's my favorite. I worked with a client. They're a really big brand. They have multiple in-house creative agencies. And so what they were doing is they were working on an internal training video, and it was kind of before COVID, so Zoom was a little less intense. It might have been during COVID, but we were still like getting the ball rolling on kind of the work from home, how to train people from home, how to get them to interact from home. And what they did for one of their kind of employee training and onboarding videos was they hired voiceover talent to record via Zoom. So they like recorded very similar to how I'm recording here and used that and edited it together to create training content. So instead of it being just a voiceover with an animation, they wanted someone in front of the screen, and because they wanted someone who could truly like narrate and make the content come to life, but still be able to put a face to the name. So it was very outside the scope of what they did, but they were like, we don't want someone who looks polished in how they're delivering it. Like, we want it to look real, but we want it to sound like a good quality. So that was definitely one of the coolest ones. I think we worked with like 8 different talent, and we had to kind of write down like what they wore just in case there was revisions, where they were, what the lighting looked like. So it was really cool, and it was really nice because we got to give, I think we did 10 different talent, kind of an experience that they'd never done before, in a place where it was okay if like it wasn't perfect, if they struggled a little bit with being on camera, because that was what the client wanted. So there was kind of no risk for them putting themselves out there. Good tip here. Audacity has great noise reduction, and of course, starting with a good mic is crucial. That's very good advice. Melissa asks, what can beginners do to get started on voices? Is there a step-by-step onboarding? I'm not sure if there's a step-by-step onboarding. I'd have to relook at it. I know our blog and our YouTube channel both have insanely detailed they ran you through the guide from the help on voices.com in there. Our blog is amazing. There's so many gems. Even as not a talent, sometimes I'll go look in there just to see kind of how we can help fix issues. If someone's struggling, like whether it be like adding a pop filter, making recommendations. But the biggest thing I would say is just finding out how to kind of set up your studio in a way that works and sounds good. So you don't be afraid to like ask your peers. Like, there's huge amount of support within the voiceover community. Say like, hey, I'm trying to set up my studio. Does this sound okay? I know a lot of voices talent have made like huge friend groups just from kind of bouncing ideas off each other, bouncing auditions. Like, hey, do you think this sounded good? So don't be afraid to make friends and make connections like that. The voiceover industry is definitely, people love to talk, people love to help. So don't be afraid with that. But also these webinars, YouTube's another good one. There's a lot of quick videos to answer kind of shorter questions that I find very helpful. And just using our site in general, like sometimes people are a little like, how do I add a payment? How do I do this? And we have some really good quick YouTube videos that I love to leverage. Just because when you're doing something, like the first time you get hired, or if you're having to add a payment, you haven't had to do that in a couple weeks. Sometimes it's nice to have that quick kind of little refresher. So that'd be my big thing. And then just thinking of your auditions, like don't think about it as, oh, I didn't win this. Keep going, because it's just so much practice. And you think like if you practice sport every day for an hour, I think it's there's this saying of like it's 1,500 hours to become an expert or something. So if you keep ticking away at that, you will hone in on the craft. Lots of feedback on Audacity being a great one. Definitely is kind of one of the more common ones to use. I'm just keeping up with the chat here. Anything else anyone has questions on? As you can see here in the chat, the community is quite great. People are more than happy to help and share what they've learned along the way. Another question that we got from socials this week was, what's the hardest type of voice to find? I would say for me personally, the hardest ones are the things that you want to authenticate a little bit more. So when you're looking for a certain language or a certain accent. And then as well as people of a certain ethnicity or background. That gets especially tricky because you have to kind of do some digging, and it's something that you don't want to make a mistake on. Like if they're looking for, let's say like a Black female, you don't want to risk sending someone that's potentially not that race, just because it, again, like that Ireland example, it sounds great to you, but if you were someone that's there, they're going to catch that, and you don't want to kind of risk making a bad impression on the end audience. What mic do you recommend? Ooh, there's quite a few. I'm not going to lie. Mics are not my specialty. I'm pretty blessed here. I walked in and Randy had a mic set up, the camera set up. I'm not the technical expert, but I can definitely get that for you. I know we have a couple different blog posts on that as well. But it's unfortunately not my expertise. I can usually pick it out on profiles, funny enough. If you do have a mic I like, but I don't know past reading it and it standing out. Joy says, I can't afford a premium membership yet as I'm a beginner, but does Voices have a free guest account? We do in fact have a free guest account. So the difference being that you have to be invited to the jobs in order to audition, rather than it will go out to you. There's some niche cases where if we don't have premium members that fit the bill, we will invite guests. So you will still get some auditions, but not near as many as you would get as a premium membership. But it still doesn't hurt to get your foot wet, get your profile filled out, get a feel for the website as you start practicing and kind of honing in on that craft. I will also, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but we do have a Black Friday sale, usually in November, and I know one's coming up, where we discount for new members. So if you're kind of looking to get into it, it's a great way to kind of reduce your startup cost, but then start getting those auditions. And I would say there's a good chance of, if you're keep up at it and you make sure your audio quality is good, that you'll pay back your membership within a few months. Some good advice there on mics. Definitely there's several $100 to $200 range kind of is like the sweet spot of not too cheap but not too expensive when you're starting up. Cheaper it is, the cheaper it could sound like. Definitely good advice there. And good, quiet, and sound treated room is a bigger priority. Randy's jumped in with a good recommendation of microphones greater than about 125 is usually adequate. He is definitely our audio guy. So any audio questions, he is your expert on. He also does music and stuff outside of voices, so he's really our go-to expert here when it comes down to that stuff. I'm a little less fun. I just play soccer outside of my job here, so not as cool of a hobby. Not famous within London, Ontario, that's for sure. Another one we got was, what do you look for when shortlisting talent? I feel like a broken record, but I would say the number one thing is audio quality. I can tell you within the first 5 seconds of listening to Audition if I'm willing to shortlist or not, based on the audio quality. And then if the tone audio quality is good, I'll keep listening to kind of hear the tone and how they took the artistic direction. So, and then it comes down to just kind of like how I've taken the creative direction that the client has given us. And I also will try and find a range, because I know how I'm interpreting professional but conversational might be different than how they're anticipating. So I'll look for talent within that range, and a lot of times I'll go through and kind of narrow down, let's say the top 20 that I'm thinking, and then go through them and pick the top 10 to 15 and make sure I don't kind of send people that are all within that same like 10%, that I look for more of like kind of 20% either way on energy, pace, just so they get a feel. And then of course, even when we do send over auditions, the first thing I do is say like, if this doesn't hit the mark, let us know and we'll happily gather more for you. So sometimes we'll go into the same job we've already shortlisted. And this pulls on, I guess, the earlier question of more than 20 people. Sometimes I'll shortlist 15. The client will say, none of these were the right, give us a little bit more direction. If we had a good turnout to the job, I'll go back to the same job because it's usually that we have auditions in there and I don't need to cast again. It's just I need to pull kind of a different note that applied. So a lot of times if there's 50 plus auditions, sometimes we're pulling 2 or 3 shortlists from them. And I also have clients that will refer back to previous shortlists instead of casting again. So they'll be like, hey, we went with Kim last time, but we were looking at the shortlist and we really like John for this new project, because it saves themselves some time and effort as well and speeds things along instead of kind of starting from scratch with storyboards. They'll just kind of put an old shortlist in front of their team and be like, is there anyone on here that would work?
Can you explain why sometimes you listen to the audio and sometimes it's the client first?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. So Randy made a good point. He's asking, why sometimes do I listen to the audio first and other times the client listens to it first? And it's because we have 2 different paths for sourcing voiceover on voices.com. Some of it is that clients will post directly on our site, so then they will directly post that job out to the talent. The talent will respond, and then that client will review. And Voices doesn't overly interact. If they have questions or they need help, we will jump in, but they handle the bulk of the shortlisting, reviewing, the communication with the talent about setting up sessions, revisions. That will all go through the client. The other option is that we have a managed service team here where we cast on their behalf. So they'll work with an account manager and they'll also work with a project manager to kind of set things up. So then that's when we cast for them. So we'll put out the job posting, we'll get the responses, we'll go through and pick what we think are kind of the best 15 and send them over to the client via email. They'll take a listen, they'll let us know, and then we continue to manage the project. So we would set up sessions, we handle any revisions, we kind of put that on our own. So those are kind of the 2 different ways. I would say a lot of the complex projects that have a lot of moving parts typically loop in voices.com because then they have the leverage of our project management team. So that they can kind of get some help that way as well, kind of acting almost as like a contractor to their own team. So a lot of clients will actually do both. So when they have the time, they will post on the website themselves. And when they get something that like they're a little less confident in, or they're just swamped, instead of hiring another employee, they'll just kind of have us take on some help when they're busy, especially around now. September to November is definitely kind of the busy time. For a lot of creatives, just because you're prepping the holiday campaigns and the Super Bowl campaigns kind of as they come in. Always lovely to have you too. There's something else I was going to add to that. I'm too familiar. Oh, the other thing is sometimes even when you're working on the site, it will be a client posting, but on behalf of their client. So sometimes it's still an end client has hired an agency and then the agency is sourcing the voiceover. So sometimes there's a lot of moving parts in terms of teams, in terms of reviews. So sometimes things just get so delayed where there's so many hands in the pot that like if you feel like you're being shortlisted all the time and you're not winning the job, or you just feel like you haven't won a project in a while, like don't beat yourself up because sometimes it's literally like the person that casts creative direction and then when it played the game of telephone and ended up at the end client, it's different. Like I have worked on some projects that we have 3 agencies and an end client working on the same project and they're all on the final call to give direction. A lot of times my clients will try to limit like one end person from the end client and one creative, just because too many hands in a pot slows things down. But I've jumped onto some sessions where there's like 10 people in the room, all listening in. So it truly is a different beast in terms of what you're going to get every day. And sometimes it's the same client can post 10 projects, and one will be just them and another one will have kind of 4 different agencies working on it and some post-production houses. Like it's quite a range, but don't let that scare you, because everyone at the end of the day just wants to set the voiceover talent up for success, because they want to have the great kind of end product. Another question we got kind of on the topic of clients was, can you explain what happens on a typical directed session? So sessions vary a little bit from client to client, but a lot of them they do over like a Zoom or a Skype technology, so that all of their team can come together and listen in. And then what they'll typically do is you'll do takes, and I would recommend labeling your takes. Some clients will have a specific route they want to follow, like, and they'll instruct you that up front. If they don't, some will lean on you to kind of be like, what's your preferred method? I recommend going like chunk by chunk, or line by line, depending on how long the script is. And that way you can kind of break it down. And then at the end, they'll edit it all together. Some talent like to do a full read through of up front. Some like to do it at the end. I personally like to do a chunk by chunk read through, and then I'll read through everything at the end. I would really recommend reading the script and practicing up front. It makes the session go a lot quicker and a lot smoother. And a lot of times you'll want to label your takes using your voice, just so they can mark down which ones they like, which will make it easier for them to edit. So it'd be like line 1, take 1. Line 1, take 2, more energy. Line 1, take 3, calmer, more pause. And they'll give you that direction. So that's kind of how it ends up being set up. Big thing, just be flexible, because everyone kind of does things a little bit differently. Some clients will let you kind of run the show. Others will be a little bit more hands in the pot. But again, at the end of the day, everyone wants the same thing. So if you kind of are with a client and it seems like something's not working, like, don't be afraid to be like, hey, can we try this? Or can I try reading like the last sentence of this just to like ease me into it? Or like start mid paragraph if you're struggling with something. And don't be afraid to need multiple takes. I was recording a video this morning, and I'm not a professional voiceover actor, but I think I did the same line 4 times because I couldn't get narrator out when I was reading. It was just one of those days where my brain didn't want to wrap my head around it. And everyone gets that. Everyone stumbles over words when they talk and read a script. Like, just because you're a professional doesn't mean you have to be perfect. So don't let it bother you. Don't get flustered, and things will just keep moving on. They totally get it, and that's why they have live directed sessions. Another one we got on socials this week was, do clients prefer custom auditions, or is my demo good enough? I would say custom auditions every time. There's the odd time the clients will just want demos, and they'll specify that. They'll typically put it in instead of a sample script, like just upload your demo. We're good that way, especially if they've worked with you before. But if there's a sample script, I would say always do the custom audition. Your demo is likely going to get passed by because it's going to stand out if they send 15 auditions to their client and one of them's a demo and the other 14 are reading a custom script. Even if they loved your voice, they're more likely just to send the 14 that were the custom script, because it adds to that client experience, right? People are paying good money for voiceover. They're paying good money to kind of have the video or the animation or the phone system or whatever put together. So when you can kind of add that like cherry on top of like, this is how it's going to sound with your script, it helps them envision it, and also just gives a better experience in terms of like a little more white glove, a little more kind of upper echelon of voiceover, and rather than just like a Fiverr or something where it's kind of like quick, we're just trying to get this done as fast and cheap as possible. So I would really recommend and strongly encourage only ever doing custom auditions. The only time I would ever recommend a demo is if someone specifically says, just upload your demo, we're in a hurry to get you kind of hired, whether it be a session or they just kind of want the final script through faster. That would be the only time I would really go with a demo. And kind of the last question we got this week from socials was, I don't have a recording studio. Can I audition anyways and then go to one if I book the job? Short answer, yes. Long answer, you're not going to book a lot of jobs if you're giving poor quality auditions. So if you have, like if you can edit out, like you have like a home studio that's not perfect, so you'd want to go to a recording studio for like the broadcast work, the final, to do a live director session, to use Source Connect. But you can make your audio sound good, then you can do that. But I think the chance of it sounding good, if you need to go to a recording studio to do the final thing, are very slim to none. I would say the only time I really recommend talent go in to a recording studio is if they don't have like Source Connect or ISDN, where it's like the software is something they're missing, or if someone asks for an exact mic or something like that to match, like if they're doing multiple different talent. Otherwise, I would just try and get your home studio up to par where you can record a broadcast quality piece there, because if the audio is not there on your custom audition, even if you put it in your proposal that you'll go to a professional studio, the chances are they're not opening your proposal if your audio quality was bad, because they've already moved on to the next one, because they're just assuming, and incorrectly so in some cases, that that's what your end audio is going to look like. And it just seems like, oh, you're probably not going to have the flexibility, you're not going to have the range, when, you know, the person they just listened to and the person they listen to after sound exactly like a commercial quality audio. Joy's asking, I'm so sorry, samples are better than DIY demos. I'm not 100% sure on what you mean there, so if you want to expand, that would be great. DIY demos is in if you're kind of like reading scripts at home, you've put them together like a demo of like 5 different scripts, versus reading like a custom sample of their script. The custom sample of their script will always win. People want to hear the script come to life for them. And so you have to think, a lot of the producers, creatives, like they've worked hard to get these storyboards together, to get the script. Like there's a lot of passion in terms of what they've created already. So getting to hear it come to life when a voiceover actor reads their script brings out, just in general, more emotions, and just a better response than if someone has their generic demo of like doing a Honda commercial or McDonald's. Like, it's great, but it's not the same. Even if it's another McDonald's script and you've worked with them before, that's what you're trying to showcase, they'd rather hear you read their custom script, and then in your proposal you can say like, hey, I've worked for McDonald's before, or in your profile. That's what I would recommend. I would say 100% if there's a sample script, you want to read that for the client. It makes their vision come to life, and a lot of times it changes kind of how they see things fit. No worries, Joy. I don't mind repeating myself at all, and I think there's people that jump in and out all throughout these, so it makes sense to kind of get similar questions as we go, and it's always helpful for everyone on the call. because not everyone kind of joins right at once. Some people are coming from a meeting, a session, another job. You never know, right? So any more questions before we wrap this up? We're kind of nearing the end of time. But if there's more questions, I'll kind of stay on for a little bit. Awesome. Well, it's been great chatting with you guys. It's always a lovely time to get to interact with the talent community. It's always, you guys are so fun, you're so vibrant, and you have just amazing questions. And the motivation and fire from the entrepreneurs is always great to hear and liven up our days. It's been great to have you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. You can comment on the YouTube video, you can comment on socials, you can send support a message. Whatever it is, we'll always find the answer for you. We really value our talent community, and we love to see you guys succeed. So any way we can help, let us know. And sometimes if you might think like, I have a question, but it seems dumb, or I don't know, don't ever feel bad about that, because usually if you have a question, there's probably 10 other people that are asking the same question, just haven't had the chance to ask. Joy says, how can I make my audition stand out? The big thing I would say is audio quality and starting right away with the script. So no intros or slating, like some will say like, Joy West here to read, or something like that. Skip that. They want to hear their script right off the bat, because again, like they want to kind of know if it's worth listening to the full demo in the first 5 to 10 seconds. And I would put your best take first. So if you do 3 takes and your third one was your best, don't just upload the raw file. Slice it and put your third one as your first take, because you want to put your best one up front. Because sometimes when they're going through, if your first take doesn't sound the best, they'll keep going. We try to listen through all of the demos, but sometimes, especially if you have a broad range and take 1 and take 2 sound totally different, some clients don't know that a lot of people put multiple takes on their demos, and it does say like you've listened to 10 out of 30 seconds, but when you're moving fast, not everyone catches that. So I'd put your best take up front and really focus on your audio quality. In terms of creative direction, do your best to kind of go with what they're asking, but it's okay if you kind of misinterpret, don't hit the nail on the head. A lot of times, if your voice is what they're looking for and you're just slightly off, they'll ask for a second audition. They won't just completely rule you out. But if your audio quality is off, if you slate, if it sounds way off in terms of take, then they would rule you out. So just practice and keep uploading. And a lot of times, sometimes it's even just getting your name in front of them on a regular basis. Like there's lots of clients I have that post multiple jobs a day. So if they constantly see like Joy West, Joy West, Joy West on their shortlist, they're like, man, this girl's really hustling. She must be like a killer voiceover talent. And then they're just gonna be like, hey, they're finally gonna get that job. And they're gonna be like, hey, you know who'd be great for this? Joy. Because we've heard her for, the past 15 jobs, and she's there, but hasn't been quite the right fit, but now she is. So don't hesitate to audition, because a lot of times people will actually, whether they know it or not, use talent that they've heard before that are just finally like the exact fit. And I have one of my biggest clients, I would say more likely than not, pulls from old shortlists, because they're like, they take note of who they really like on it, even if they're not a good fit for that project. Any more questions before we head out? I'll give it a minute, just in case. Don't want to cut anyone off if they're typing. Perfect. Well, thanks for having you, and thanks for being so interactive, guys. Like I mentioned, the talent community is always great. don't hesitate to reach out to us at voices.com, and don't hesitate to reach out to each other, because I know some people have made lifelong friends and partnerships by kind of just getting to know the talent community. So don't hesitate to do either. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.